Hello and welcome to this edition of the Light and Cassette Podcast. And this week we will be covering the 1984 classic and the first in one of the most successful horror franchises of all time, A Nightmare on Elm Street. And TeeKay is joining me to help tackle this juggernaut.
It's funny because I consider the trio. I consider Jason, Michael, and Freddy. Like, those are the ones that were ideal as a kid. And Freddy was one that I didn't really take to as a kid. He used to scare the shit out of me, but that was probably why I didn't really dig him that much.
Yeah, he definitely had that effect on a lot of kids. Not really me, because I was a little older when I saw the first Nightmare, but I think I was about 11 or 12. But originally, I was going to do the Halloween series, as it was a trendsetter, and it's one of my favorites in the horror genre. But two things changed my mind. One, this is the 35th year anniversary of the original Nightmare being released. And two, the documentary, Never Sleep Again, which is a 4-hour titan of a documentary that details the making of all the movies, except the remake, because no one gives a fuck about that piece of shit anyway.
Right.
And it's what kind of inspired me in a weird way to start podcasting. Even though I thought I saw it, 7-8 years ago, it introduced me to the Angry Video Game Nerd, and they have some really cool behind-the-scenes stuff. If you've never seen the Never Sleep Again documentary, check it out. It's well worth your time.
I'm gonna have to pick that up. Yeah, I've heard you talk a lot about it, but I've never watched it myself.
Oh, it's great, and I use that to do a lot of the research for this podcast. So it's coming directly from the people that made it. Now, A Nightmare on Elm Street was created, written, and directed by Wes Craven, who came up with the idea in the early 1980s. He came up with the idea after seeing articles in the LA Times of young men dying in their nightmares in Asian. He said in the Asian realm, and they show a little article, and it looks like the Philippines and Japan. They really didn't go too much into it. He just said that's where he got the idea, especially for like the coffee pot scene.
Interesting.
And he used Elm Street because a college he taught at before becoming a filmmaker was just off of a street called Elm Street. And JFK was shot on Elm Street in Dallas, which I never knew that until I watched that documentary. And I remember learning a lot about JFK and the shooting and all that in school and stuff.
Nobody ever talks about the street he was shot on. That's a nice little tidbit.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Wes showed his script to Sean Cunningham, who directed the first Friday the 13th. And Sean, along with most of Hollywood, said, "No one will be afraid of this because it's a dream." They must have felt pretty fucking stupid.
Right? I didn't know Sean Cunningham could have had a hand in this. That's a very big missed opportunity.
He did do some second unit work, but it wasn't much because I don't think that Heather Langenkamp, the star, really liked him or got along with him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She said, Wes tells a story about it in one of I don't think it's in the Never Sleep Again documentary, but I've seen it somewhere, and it might be. I mean, there's so much in it that, it's hard to keep it all straight, but there was some kind of friction between them. The script sat for 3 years until Bob Shea, founder of New Line Cinema, read it. We're going to learn a lot about Bob Shea through the making of these movies in a way we've never really discussed any studio head. New Line Cinema, he was a founder of New Line, and back in those days, New Line was a distribution company as opposed to a production company. And Nightmare on Elm Street was one of the first movies they made. Basically, they just licensed already existing movies. They tell a story about he got his start because he discovered that he was a copyright lawyer before he founded the studio. And he found out that the copyright on Reefer Madness, the hilarious film about marijuana from the 30s or 40s, had expired, and he picked it up. That's kind of how he started his company.
That's interesting. That's funny.
Heather Langenkamp was cast as the lead, Nancy Thompson. Amanda Wyss as Tina Gray, Nancy's best friend. Nick Corey as Rod Lane. And he was going under... Nick Corey was his real name, but I think Nick Corey was his stage name, and his real name was Jesus Garcia or something like that. But he said that there was a prejudice against Latin actors in Hollywood, so he was pretending to be Italian. So that's why we got the awesome fake Italian accent from him.
Wow.
Johnny Depp in his first role is Glenn Lance. Charlie Sheen wanted the role, but wanted too much money. And Glenn was Nancy's boyfriend. John Saxon is Lieutenant Thompson, Nancy's father. Ronnie Blakely is Nancy's mother. And the star of the franchise himself, Robert Englund, was cast as Freddy Krueger, the man who stalks the teens in their dreams.
The legend himself.
Definitely. Originally, David Warner was offered the role, but had to pull out. I didn't know much about David Warner until I looked him up, and I know this motherfucker from quite a bit. He was in Titanic. He played Billy Zane's friend there, the cop who, plans. You've seen Titanic before, right?
Yeah, is that the one that shot himself whenever he shot the guy when he was trying to get on the lifeboat?
No, he was the one who he planted the diamond on Jack when they're walking back to the
Oh, no
cap.
shit.
Yeah, and he was in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. He was basically a stand-in for Baxter Stockton.
Okay.
Wes named the villain Freddy because that was the name of one of his childhood bullies, so the name brought up negative feelings to him already. David Miller created the makeup for Freddy. He worked on the makeup for Thriller, so he quite the career going in the 80s.
Seriously, holy shit. Freddy looks great in this movie, by the way. He did an excellent job.
Oh, he definitely does. It still holds up. He came up with the makeup for Freddy while eating pepperoni pizza, actually. Interestingly enough.
I can see the resemblance.
Yeah, after you hear that, it's kind of hard not to see it.
Yeah, exactly.
Wes made the sweater red and green because he read an article in a science magazine that stated that red and green are the two hardest colors for the human eye to see side by side. Never really thought about that. I don't know how that works or anything. They don't go into any detail. Just,
I was about to say, I don't understand how that correlates to Freddy needing a red and green sweater.
he wanted to make him look like an optical illusion, I guess. I don't know. That's what he said.
Wow.
It's the 80s. They were doing all kinds of cocaine, I'm sure.
I was about to say probably some LSD.
Yeah. Now, originally, Freddy was supposed to be a child molester, but there was a huge news story at the time of a preschool where the children had accused the teachers of molesting them. So they backpedaled a little bit, but it's still pretty implied. And that's the McMartin trial, if anyone is interested. I don't know. Anyone's interested in true crime, but
I was thinking about that halfway through this movie. It doesn't point in any, and it's like a common misconception. I don't remember much of the rest of the franchise, but it's not really implied in the first movie at all that he was ever a molester. I don't know why later on everybody still thinks that Freddy was a child molester. He's more of just a child murderer.
that's a little bit with the licking the phone. That scene towards the end, but we'll get to it. I could kind of see why someone might pick up on it, but it's not overt.
Okay.
Principal photography, and I found this a couple places online. I think they have the wrong year, but what I found was that principal photography began on June 11th, 1984, and only lasted 32 days. But in one of the extras on the Never Sleep Again documentary, Amanda Wyss said that they were filming it in 1983. So either 83 or 84, but they made the movie in just about a month, which I would think that it will be 83 because the movie came out in November 84. And you're talking about a pretty short turnaround there.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. They filmed that whole movie in 30 days. I'm highly impressed.
Oh, definitely. And it seems amazing when you think about all the effects in the movie, and all the effects are practical, so they had to make it,
Right. That's just more over the top impressive.
Oh, definitely. And there were tensions between Wes and Bob Shaye on set, and that lasted for years. One way that Wes tried to make amends with Bob was to put the sticky stairs scene in the movie where Nancy was trying to run upstairs but kept sinking in them. A scene Bob really wanted, but Wes wasn't particularly interested in. He even let Bob direct the scene. They also had a big disagreement about the ending, which we'll get to, and they had 3 or 4 different endings before settling on this one. Charles Bernstein composed the score, which is one of the most iconic horror scores of all time. And every major Hollywood studio rejected the film, so New Line decided to gamble and release it themselves. They released it on November 9th, 1984. It had a budget of $1.8 million, and it made $25.5 million back. West credits the movie with giving him a real career, even though he had made films before, and it made New Line Cinema a player among the Hollywood studios.
That's a pretty big payday. Holy shit.
Yeah. I mean, if you look, I don't know what the exact math on the return is, but it's definitely a worthy investment.
I was about to say, what, a couple podcasts ago, you're saying what, they're supposed to make triple their investment based off what they spent?
Yeah.
I think they accomplished that.
Yeah, they made over 20 times their investment.
It's very impressive.
There's nothing left but to get into it. That old school, awesome red and black New Line title screen flashes, and we get underway. We see someone in a sweater making a glove with knives as fingers. As we get some opening credits, we then see a blonde girl in a nightgown running down a hallway in a boiler room as a voice calls out, "Tina." A sheep spooks her. Don't know why they have an obsession with sheep in this fucking universe. This isn't the last time we will see a sheep. Maybe lead the sheep to slaughter. I don't know.
That's a good thought.
If I had to guess, I would say that's what it is, but you never fucking know.
I was listening very briefly at the beginning of this. I was going over some old notes about this movie, and they said that hallway and basically that boiler room that she starts off in the movie is actually a condemned jail.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that? And they said they had to close it down because of the asbestos that was in the place.
Yeah, I wonder how many people got sick with asbestos after that.
I know Wes Craven was saying, watch us die in 20 years for breathing that shit in for weeks on end.
Which is crazy because he died not that long ago.
I did the math though. From the time that movie was created, from the time that he died, he actually lived 31 years after that. So I think he was I don't think that's what got him.
No, he did die of cancer, brain cancer, I believe. I believe so. That's what it was.
That's sad.
Yeah.
I do like the you mentioned earlier introducing Johnny Depp, and I think it's really awesome to mention how underrated horror movies get sometimes. Like, people don't recognize it as a an awesome genre, but without horror movies, you wouldn't have some of the best known actors and actresses. Like Jennifer Aniston was in Leprechaun, Jamie Lee Curtis, Halloween, Kevin Bacon, Friday the 13th. Who else?
For sure. Oh,
I mean, the list goes on. Paul Rudd was in Halloween. Leonardo DiCaprio was in Critters. I mean, the list just goes on.
Oh, Corey Feldman, fucking
yeah, another Friday.
Yeah, they're all over. You can find some early works of them if you know where to look. Well, Tina runs through the boiler room, looking around, and the man chasing her scratches his knife glove, making a terrible sound, and she runs to what turns out to be a dead end with a fireplace behind her. Then he suddenly scares her when he pops up behind her, and she suddenly wakes up. Her mom comes in and makes her feel like shit by saying she has to cut her fingernails or stop that kind of dreaming. She has 4 slashes in her nightgown. Her mother goes back to bed after a man comes in and kind of shoots Tina a dirty look. Tina grabs the crucifix off her wall and goes back to sleep.
The dude who gives Tina a dirty look is actually Johnny Depp's agent.
Is it really?
Johnny Depp's agent / stepdad, I think, was his official title.
He was getting himself a little payday,
right? I think they said he was super psyched just to have that one-liner in the whole movie.
I'm sure. Hey, now he's in movie history.
Yeah, right.
The next morning, we see little girls playing jump rope and singing, "1, 2, Freddy's coming for you." We see Tina arriving at school with her friend Nancy and Nancy's boyfriend Glenn. Tina's boyfriend Rod comes up and basically tells her he wants to fuck. Nancy and Glenn try to comfort her as she is still freaked out from her dream by telling her it was just that, a dream. That's where we get his fake Italian accent of "up yours with a twirling lawnmower."
What a thing to say! Like, where did he come up with this shit? Twirling lawnmower? What, like a weed whacker or like a tiller? Like, what does he want here?
Yeah, I don't know. It's the Rod character is definitely interesting.
He's a dick. I can't stand Rod this. Well, he has. I don't know. Some of the times I laugh. Most of the time, I'm like, yeah, this guy's an asshole.
Yeah. We then cut to night, and Nancy and Glenn plan to stay the night at Tina's because her mom went away with her boyfriend. Glenn has a tape with a plane sound because he told his mother he is staying with his cousin who lives by the airport. And then all other sounds start to play, like drag racing, a woman screaming, and it's meant to be a funny little bit, I guess.
I thought it was clever. It would be an awesome idea if the car wasn't crashing, if people were getting shot.
Yeah, that was a nice idea. I mean, it was a bit of a miss for me, but I can see how, especially maybe kids of that day, would have got a big kick out of it.
I heard they had to shoot that part multiple times because Johnny Depp couldn't get the cassette player to work for him.
What a fucking idiot. Tina and talk about Tina's dream, and Tina realizes they have the same dream. Glenn has a weird look on his face, and I guess we are to assume he had the similar type of dream. We hear screeching coming from outside, so we go to check it out. Horror Cliche 101. Investigate the creepy noise.
Mm-hmm. And 101 is broken many times in this movie.
Damn right. And especially with no weapons.
Exactly.
Rod jumps out and tackles Glenn. As he heard their conversation, he was making the noise to freak them out. Rod pulls a switchblade on Glenn, and they get into a little heated altercation, but Nancy defuses it. That's kind of an extreme to go to. Someone calls you a dickhead, and you just pull out a knife. It's like, well, that escalated quickly.
Furthering my point that Rod just has two asshole moments within like 15 seconds of each other.
Yeah, Rod just... It hit. Rod and Tina head up to Tina's mother's room. Glenn tries to get himself some, and Nancy says they are there for Tina, not themselves. They never say why Tina can go get pounded out, but they can't fuck themselves.
And how big of a situation would it be that not only does he get denied, but he has to listen to Rod and Tina bang in the next room, and Rod howls like a fucking werewolf when he's done.
Right? He does lay there miserable, and we hear, and it's the most over-the-top sex scene ever, or sound.
For sure. They wanted to really pound it home.
Whenever I was a teenager, having some of my first experiences, it was more like, It wasn't like screaming.
It was, yeah, like I very emphasized for sure.
Yeah. Teenagers don't sound like that when they're fucking.
No, I don't even think adults mostly sound like that when they're fucking, especially the howling.
Yeah, unless you got a screamer, but no. Rod reveals he had a nightmare after they are done, and we see Nancy sleeping in Tina's bed, and the crucifix falls off the wall. Tina wakes up when she hears something hitting the window. She hears someone calling out her name. We cut back to Nancy, and she is sound asleep. And in one of the most famous visuals from the movie, we see someone trying to come through the wall, it was actually a latex wall.
I was about to ask you, was it some kind of latex or was it a sheet? It looks fucking great.
Oh, it does. It looks a lot better than when they tried to do the CGI in that piece of shit 2010 movie. That's all it was latex.
That's interesting.
She wakes up and hangs the crucifix back up. Tina goes outside to investigate the sound, and the voice continues to call out her name. She goes into an alley, and we see the villain for the first time. And he has long arms that go the width of the alley. In the documentary, for the series, we learn that the arms were on makeshift fishing poles, and some of the crew were working them like a marionette. It looks kind of goofy, but I still think it works.
The accordion arms don't do it for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's You're going to have hit and misses with effects from movies from this day. So I get it.
I mean, you had one great one with the wall. You kind of missed the mark with the arms for me.
Yeah. He takes off after Tina as she runs away. He cuts 2 of his fingers off and they squirt green liquid. He eventually wrestles her down, and Rod wakes up as she is freaking out in the bed. And we see 4 slashes appear on her chest, and she goes into the air, twirling like a helicopter, knocking Rod and his tighty whities down. It appears she is being dragged up the wall, and this is actually a rotating room that they built where they can spin the room upside down.
Really? That's cool. I never knew that.
And they use it again in a scene later in the movie. She falls from the ceiling onto her bed. And they said that they had to cut a lot out of this scene because they wanted a big splash of blood whenever she landed. A big splash on Rod's face or chest or whatever. But the MPAA were, they had a stick up their ass that day.
Mm.
And we see Glenn and Nancy trying to get into the room. And they do, but Rod is nowhere in sight when they finally do.
I think that this part of the movie is really great because this is the first time you actually get to hear Freddy talking one-on-one. And it's a classic line. Tina's like, please, God. He lifts up his claw hand. This is God. Very frightening. But then the very next scene, he's running down the street like he has shit in his pants.
Yeah. Well, actually, Robert Englund said in the documentary that the glove was really heavy. So it made him his arm kind of droop when he walked. So I don't know if that explains the running at all, but he said it kind of changed his posture and the way he moved because of the heaviness of it.
I can see that. I think it would be a little bit more menacing, though, if he kind of dragged the claw hand, though.
Yeah, I think so, too.
Like, just let it, like, limber at his side and maybe try to, I don't know, it might look goofier if he tried to run with his hand limp, but that shit in his pants run move.
Yeah, it's not good.
And I mean, it's really great, though, because you see inside Freddy's tactics, and it's really great because he cuts off his fingers, he gets his face ripped off. It gives you that sense of hopelessness that you can't do nothing to me because I'm fucking myself up.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That was the part I didn't even put 2 and 2 together on, but that's very true.
And another thing, how different would Rod's situation have been if he sees Tina going up the wall, getting slashed on his chest 2019 with his camera phone? Do you think he'd have enough sense to grab it and videotape this shit going on?
Probably not, because everybody in horror movies are fucking stupid.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe, but...
Well, you say that, but you know what? Nancy is actually very impressive in this fucking movie.
She is. She's definitely one of the better horror final girls.
I definitely have to agree.
We do meet her parents at the police station, as her father is the police lieutenant. It seems the parents are divorced. Her dad is pissed, and the mother seems a little more understanding. But I gotta say, this was some bad acting from Heather Langenkamp in this scene. How could you say I don't take murder seriously like that? Was like, oh.
I caught on to that too. I didn't mention it though. Yeah, oh God.
It wouldn't have been so bad if she wouldn't have done that. Like, oof. Wow.
Yeah, it was definitely a miss.
She does a great job pretty much every other scene, but whenever she has that like cry out, high pitched moments, like, oof. The next morning, Marge, who's Nancy's mother, fixes herself a nice strong vodka coffee while watching coverage of the murder on TV. Nancy decides to go to school because it'll distract her. It seems someone is watching her, but when she turns around, the person is gone. Rod comes up behind her and pulls her behind some bushes to try and proclaim his innocence. Her father then appears with his gun drawn, but Nancy jumps in front of him to protect Rod after he takes off running. 3 other cop cars appear, and Rod surrenders without much resistance, screaming he didn't kill her. Nancy is angry at her father because she feels he used her. We then cut to her English class, and the teacher is Lynn Shay, who is Bob Shay's sister, and she's one of the stars in the Insidious series. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Didn't know it was Bob Shay's sister, though.
Yeah. A student goes to the front of the class to read an excerpt from Julius Caesar. Nancy sees Tina in a body bag outside her class, and when we cut back to the front, the kid is reading in a whisper. Nancy leaves class, and it appears Tina's body bag is being dragged down the hall. Nancy takes off running after her, and she runs into a hall monitor. The hall monitor asks for her hall pass. Fucking nerd. And one of the most quoted lines from the movie, Nancy replies, "Screw your pass."
You already said horror trope 101 going towards the scary noise. This is now the third time it's been done. By who is going after a body bag with a body in it that's standing upright, all bloody on the inside, that's talking to you? I'm noping right out of that fucking school.
Yeah, I'm out. I don't need to talk to you. I'm fucking gone.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
I would like to say that hall monitors, I would have liked to have said that to hall monitors when I was in school, but the hall monitors were the teachers.
Yeah, I was about to say the hall monitors in my school were like security. We didn't have the, like, I don't know, class president, I guess. I don't know who the fuck was hall monitors back in the 80s.
Yeah, no, we didn't. Oh, you guys had security at your school?
Yeah, we had a couple cops. We had regular security that were there all day.
Well, you're in a more urban area than I am. I'm in a real rural area.
The only thing we didn't have were the metal detectors, but a lot of the surrounding schools had them in them.
Oof, that would be strange. The monitor calls back to Nancy in a creepy voice, and when she turns, the monitor has a glove on and says, "No running in the hallway."
Creepy as fuck.
Damn right. Nancy follows the blood trail down to the boiler room. Nancy continues to call out to Tina, but our villain appears and cuts open his very unburned chest, and again green liquid comes out, oozing along with maggots and worms. Now, it's very important that his chest wasn't burned here because it'll come up later on in the series. Nancy runs to get away from him, but comes to a dead end. The killer taunts her and says, "Come to Freddy," and that's the first time we hear his name. He moves his tongue like he's ready to perform cunnilingus. So that's kind of one of the maybe child molester type things, because you got to remember she's supposed to be 15 in this movie. And that might not. That's definitely, if you're a grown man and a 15-year-old, that's not a good situation.
That's a good point to point out. I never thought of it that way.
Because they do say whenever Nancy's mother's watching the news coverage, they do say that Tina's 15. So I guess maybe she's maybe 16, but she's still supposed to be very underage.
All right. I can see it now, putting it. If you want to piece it together like that, I can see why people can get the misconception of child molester.
You gotta. It's kind of a stretch, but I think even in some states the legal age of consent is 16. But I don't know. But Nancy,
what a shitty situation to be in, though. Like being chased by this fucking guy, and every path that you're going down is turning into walls. Like the dreamscape is changing, so you're just fucked no matter where you go.
Yeah, how do you fight him? How do you get away? Well,
how do you do anything?
She figures out a way to get out. She burns her arm on a pipe, waking her up in English class, and she's screaming like a fucking banshee and thrashing herself about. Nancy decides to go home. Very liberal 1980s high school, as we needed parental permission to leave.
Yeah, and she still needed a hall pass.
Yeah, I did think that was a funny line whenever she's like, "You'll need a hall pass," but Nancy's like, "Fuck it, I'm out." And in a funny bit, the teacher, she says about the hall pass, and once outside, Nancy sees that the burn on her arm is very real. She goes to see Rod in jail that night. He swears that someone else was in the room with them, but he couldn't see him, and he just saw cuts happening. He says he thought it was a nightmare like the one he had the night before, because he had a nightmare of a guy with knives for fingers. Nancy looks freaked out, and she leaves, but tells Rod she doesn't think he did it. She sings the 1-2, that's the 1-2 Freddy's Coming For You song, that's how I'll refer to it, while she bathes, looking like she's about to fall asleep. Then she seems to for a moment, And in another famous visual, we see the glove hand coming in between her open legs before her mother knocks on the door, waking her up.
Freddy's
There's
about to stab some puss.
damn right. There's a lot of famous visuals in this movie. Let's see. Waking her up, she dozes off again and is pulled under the water. She struggles and is eventually able to get up and out as her mother uses a coat hanger to pick the lock open. Her mother says hundreds of people die a year like that, falling asleep in the tub. I don't know where she got those statistics at, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't believe that. Plus, this is a kind of a weird thing to bring up, but if she actually is 15, when she's getting, you kind of see her topless. So, like, is that?
Yes, and that's not even her. That's a different actress, and I know that from the commentary of the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she goes whenever I think her and Wes. I don't know if Robert Englund was watching it with him or not, but I know for sure it was her and Wes Craven, and I watched it years ago. But I remember her when that scene happened. She goes, "That's not me. That's not me," and I was like, "Oh." I mean, I
put out the fucking flame.
Yeah, I was still a kid that a horn dog fucking teenager then. So I was like, "Oh."
Took the fucking air right out of your balloon.
Right. After her mother leaves the bathroom, Nancy takes out something to help her stay awake. She dozes on and off while watching TV. Glenn is outside her window, standing on a rose trellis. He asks her about her freak out in English. She hilariously looks in a little mirror and says, "God, I look 20 years old."
At this point in the movie, I didn't pick up on her looking too distressed. I mean, she does, like, later on in the movie for sure. Like, she's all fucked up looking, like luggage under her eyes and gray hair. But I don't think she looked too bad in this part.
No, because I think it was supposed to be more of a gradual thing.
Did you notice what she's watching?
What was it?
It was Evil Dead.
Okay, yeah. I haven't seen Evil Dead in a long time. I knew it was something familiar, but I couldn't.
That's not, if I'm having nightmares, that's not what I'd want to probably be watching. If I was having nightmares where I was afraid someone would be killing me, I'd be right up on there with, like, My Little Pony or something Disney related.
Right. Something that definitely would not conjure up those kind of negative feelings. Now, the I Look 20 Years Old line, I think, is kind of funny because I think that's what she actually was in real life at the time, the actress herself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know she was in college because she talked about going back to college and she was wondering if anyone would recognize her and stuff like that. Glenn says he slept like a rock the night before, which is really weird because he heard someone being fucking murdered and he saw the crime scene. I don't think I would be sleeping very well.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that.
I never really thought about that either until this viewing. I'm like, dude, your girlfriend's best friend got murdered. You saw her body and blood everywhere, but you slept just fine. Right? Just fucking fine. He must have narcolepsy because Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, he falls asleep a lot towards whenever she tells him not to fall asleep later in the movie. He's just going out.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck his deal was. Nancy asks for a favor, and she tells Glenn not to fall asleep. She has him turn the light out. She walks out of her house and calls to Glenn to make sure he is awake. Which, this is the logic I figured out, but what I figure is if someone is in your dreams, they are awake. If they are not, they're asleep.
I had a very hard time with this part. Okay, so, well, go through it, and then I'll go through my analysis of it.
All right. I don't know how that logic figures, especially we're looking at this movie in a vacuum, just this first one, but when you know the series and what's coming, it's kind of hard to buy it, but that's the only thing I can figure. Nancy walks through some alleys and to the police station. She looks in through a window and sees Rod asleep in bed, but Freddy walks into the cell. Nancy yells for Glenn, but he doesn't answer. She then sees Tina with snakes and eels and shit at her feet and a centipede coming out of her mouth. Freddy chases her back to her house, and this is the sinking stairs scene that I referred to earlier. Freddie breaks through her door when she gets back to her room, and we see Glenn asleep in a chair in her room. She wakes up freaking out just as Freddie was about to get her. She bitches at Glenn because he fell asleep, and he goes out the window and waits for her.
Now, I find it funny because whenever Freddie's chasing her, I found it, when she throws the part where she throws the garbage can, just like throws it on the ground. Like Robert Englund goes and picks up the garbage can that's completely out of his way to pick it up and throw it again out of his way. But the analysis on what is going on here. Okay, so I'm generally confused because, at the beginning here, Nancy is obviously dreaming. She's walking down the block and then asks Johnny Depp if he's there. He paused from behind the tree and says he's there. So like you said, that would mean to me that he's asleep with her. So when she goes to the jail cell and finds Rod, Freddie's in the cell, and then she calls for Glenn and he's gone. Where the fuck did he go? Did he disappear? Or, is this supposed to represent when he fell asleep?
Well, yeah, I think because he said he's there, he's awake. And I think when she yelled for him and he isn't there, that's when he fell asleep. It doesn't make any sense, but that's the only thing I can figure.
And that's what I don't understand, because like she had a visual representation of him popping out from behind the tree. So if he's not asleep yet, whenever she calls out for, like, after he popped out from behind the tree, he said, okay, fuck this. I'm going to go back to her place and sleep in the uncomfortable wooden chair.
Right. It's just so fucking weird.
I know. Like, at the end of the day, it's just a movie, so who gives a fuck? But it's really confusing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it is just a movie, but it's supposed to at least make some sort of logical sense. And most of the shit in this movie does, but that whole thing doesn't really make any sense to me either.
Right.
It is amazing that Glenn couldn't stay awake for 15 minutes to help her.
There's that narcolepsy again.
Damn right. We then see Nancy and Glenn running into the police station demanding to see Rod. This is the police station was actually at a middle school. The whole police station scene was in a middle school office.
This is the first time when you see Nancy and you notice she's starting to look fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah, she definitely is. Lieutenant Thompson is there, and he isn't happy about them being there. He agrees to go check on Rod, but dipshit Officer Garcia can't seem to find the keys.
Garcia misplacing the keys killed Rod.
Yeah, for fucking sure. We see a sheet snaking around Rod's neck and tying itself around the bars of the window, but they're too late. Rod dies before they can get him down. The most disappointing death of the movie, for sure.
You think it was disappointing?
For as big of a dickhead as he was, I kind of think so. Like, it's kind of cool, but I think if you have a character who you're establishing as a prick, he's kind of, I mean, he didn't deserve to be locked up because he didn't do it, but how the fuck are they supposed to know? But, I don't know. I just feel he was definitely supposed to be the jerk of the movie. So I feel like he should have gotten a little more.
And now that you mention that, if you look at every other death that was in this movie, they're all over the top except for this one. Like, Freddie didn't even want to bother with this guy.
Yeah. And maybe you kind of want something a little more subtle, but I mean, you got a guy with knives for fingers and a red and green sweater. You're not exactly going for subtle.
Ain't that the truth?
We cut to the funeral of Rod, and Nancy describes Freddie to her parents, and they look a little freaked out. And Marge tells her ex-husband that she's going to go get Nancy some help, or as Lieutenant Thompson calls her, Marge.
This is the first instance where I find that time moves really fast in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Did he get buried the next day?
It has to be within a couple days, because later on when Johnny Depp asks her how long it's been since she slept, she says 7 days, but I think that's the very last night that happens in the movie, but still, that means Tina's death, funeral, Rod's death, funeral, her going, and all the shit in between was all within a week.
Right? Like, they just pushed him out the fucking door. Just, had the viewing, had the funeral, had the burial. They just got the fuck rid of him.
Well, as far as they were concerned, he was a murderer, so they probably really didn't give a fuck.
No, I guess that's true, too.
We then cut to a place that studies sleep disorders. The hook Nancy up to some machines, and the doctor here is the guy who voiced Roger Rabbit, if, any Roger Rabbit fans out there. So they evaluate her while she sleeps. Marge talks with the doctor while they study her. Marge sparks up a cigarette while chatting with the doctor. He says everything looks normal. We then hear Freddy's claws, and she looks like she's convulsing. They run in to wake her up, and the doctor goes to give her something to put her back to sleep, but she pushes him away. We then see she has cuts on her arm, and she pulls out a hat that she says she pulled out of her dream. We hear Marge talking to her ex on the phone the next day, telling him about the hat. Marge says she threw the hat out and she has no idea where Nancy found it. Considering she didn't have it before she fell asleep, I don't know if she assumed Nancy, pulled it out of her snatch or her ass. Like, what the fuck?
First thing I want to mention is Nancy is really starting to look absolutely fucked after the sleep test now.
Oh, for sure.
Second thing, the mom here is fucked up. I don't know what you're trying to prove. She pulled a hat out of her dream, and she has open wounds on her arm that weren't in there before you did the sleep test, you stupid alcoholic bitch. And I'd be fucking pissed if I was Nancy, too, if she knew about Freddy and didn't say anything.
Yeah, I know this is supposed to be... Wes has several themes in this: social anxiety and, stuff, sexual anxiety, I guess, with the whole pedophilia backpedal. But... are parents of the 80s do they just not believe their kids? Were they just fucking stupid? Or
I guess. I mean, it just seems to be the common thing in most movies that it even goes beyond that. Like, not even kids with parents. It just goes on whenever you hear something crazy's going on, people just can't believe it because they just don't think it's possible.
Right. I guess it's natural to be skeptical, but you'd think, you see all this crazy shit happening to your daughter, you would probably take her a little more serious, especially if she was supposedly, a good kid beforehand and stuff like that.
They may just think the traumatic experience is fucking with her brain, but still, I mean, you watched her go into that room, you watched her fall asleep, you came back into that room, she had a hat that was nowhere to be found, and she has slice marks on her arm. Come on.
Yeah, just fucking stupid. But Nancy, to her credit, calls her mom out for being an alcoholic, for what she receives a slap. Nancy responds by smashing her mother's bottle of vodka, and she bounces.
Which was very sad. Rest in peace, bottle of vodka. Sad. Always sad to waste alcohol.
Oh, for sure. Nancy goes to meet up with Glenn, and we see some palm trees in the background of beautiful Springwood, Ohio. I don't think they established it was Ohio until the next movie, but it was definitely supposed to be Midwestern. They even say in the Never Sleep Again documentary that it's supposed to be Midwestern.
I didn't even catch on to that. That's funny. Maybe because they didn't announce it, but I didn't put the correlation together.
Yeah, and, it's when they're standing on that bridge, you can see palm trees clear as fucking day behind them. Behind Johnny Depp specifically. Glenn tells her about some ways other culture deals with dreams, while Nancy reads a book about booby traps. She returns home to see bars on all the windows and the rose trellis destroyed.
So, check this out. This is the second time that time moves really fast in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Okay, so check this out. They installed the bars. I'm going to guess she left the house in the morning. We'll say 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. And then she comes back before it's even dark out. It's actually semi-bright. So we'll say it's like 6 or 7 p.m. And there are all different kinds of bar sizes on these windows, from the door window, the window next to the door, the windows upstairs, downstairs, and they fit perfectly. Who has all of these bars that fits this house in stock and installation on the same day with open availability to do it today?
Very true. I never even thought about that, but that's a great
What
fucking point.
what a convenience.
If there's one thing that I've noticed from doing this podcast, it's movies in the 80s specifically, continuity, fuck it. Or common sense, fuck it.
Yeah, just get it done. Who cares how it was done? Just do it.
Right. Nancy's mother takes her down to the basement and tells her the story of Fred Krueger. He was a child murderer who killed about 20 kids in the neighborhood. They eventually caught him, but someone forgot to sign the search warrant in the right place, and he was free to go. That is a bunch of sharp police work from Springwood's finest.
Right.
Which shouldn't really surprise us because, we saw a fucking officer who couldn't find the fucking keys to the holding cell.
Oh, yeah, I guess that further drives the point home. That's just a bunch of fucking assholes on the force.
Oh, definitely. A bunch of the parents tracked him down to an old boiler room where he used to take his victims, and they poured gas all around the place and set it on fire. And what I assume is an unintentionally funny line, Marge tells her daughter he's dead because mommy killed him.
Yeah, it was very weird. Like, what a thing to say. And then on top of that, she pulls out the glove and said, I kept his, what'd she say? I kept his fingers? Is that what she says?
I took his gloves or something like that.
Okay, so she says that phrase, mommy killed him, and then has the memento of killing Krueger. That's serial killer behavior in itself.
Yeah, and furthermore, that thing you can assume was used to kill 20 children. Everyone knows Freddy Krueger did it, but you have the murder weapon in your house that was used to kill children.
I didn't even think about that. That's a good point too.
What the fuck is wrong with this woman? I mean, and her ex-husband's a cop. She should fucking know better. Marge does show her the glove, and I wrote here, why would she want a souvenir that was used to murder kids?
Right?
And Nancy calls Glenn later that night. Here, hold on. Nancy calls Glenn later that night, who was watching TV while listening to music. I would make a quip here about this, but I have actually done it, so I can't say shit.
Now, this kind of jacks me around here because Nancy basically kills Glenn here. I mean, throughout the movie, Johnny Depp has said he hasn't dreamt in a very long time. And now she's made him self-aware that there's a serial killer. She's going to try to get him and then specifically tells him, don't fall asleep. Thanks, Nancy. You just fucking killed him.
Yeah, I guess you could go there. Yeah, for sure. I always assumed he knew about Freddy because whenever the girls were talking about him earlier in the movie, he got a weird look on his face. But
he mentions a couple times in this movie about how he hasn't dreamt in a very long time. I think he mentions it on the pier with the palm tree behind him.
Yeah. That's, now that you mentioned that, I am thinking back on that. He does say, I don't remember my dreams anymore or something. But she tells Glenn she knows who the killer is and asks him to help her. She plans to have a hold of Freddy and Glenn wake her up when he sees her struggling. She suggests hitting him with a baseball bat because Glenn is a jock. Nice stereotyping, you crazy bitch.
I thought about that too. You're a jock. Don't you have a bat? What the fuck, bitch? What if he doesn't?
Right? He's wearing a nice little fucking midriff football jersey here, which is
off-putting. It was very off-putting.
Yeah. They plan to meet on Nancy's porch at midnight, and she utters the famous last words, whatever you do, don't fall asleep. He goes to lay back down on his bed, and I notice he's wearing shoes. Shoes. Who the fuck lays on their bed with shoes on?
I didn't even pick that up. Really? Is he wearing shoes?
He's wearing fucking Nikes the whole scene. Even when he gets murdered, he's got them fucking Nikes on his bed.
God, why the fuck would you do that? What if you stepped in dog shit?
And they're well worn. It's not like they're brand new looking shoes. You can definitely tell he's been rocking them for quite a while.
So what if he once before stepped in dog shit? Then you have old dog shit debris in your bed now. That's nasty.
Yeah. Glenn's mom comes into his room later on as he's asleep. Of course. She wakes him up only to tell him to go back to bed. Like, if that makes any fucking sense.
That's a classic Three Stooges thing right there. Hey, wake up and fall asleep. Wake up and go back to sleep.
Yeah, pretty much. That is exactly what. Nancy's mom tucks her in and takes Nancy's coffee pot and heads to bed. But fear not, because resourceful Nancy has a second coffee pot with a fresh pot brewed hidden under her bed.
See what I mean? Like, she's so one step ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, but it's kind of, where did she get the second coffee pot?
I don't
Are
know.
they a two pot family?
And you would think that, the mom couldn't smell the coffee or hear it brewing while it's well hidden unless it's cold.
Yeah, and that's a fucking fire hazard, too.
I didn't even think of that, too.
While the wife is she's worried about unplug everything when you walk out of the room, like the way she is with fire hazards, it drives me fucking crazy. So now every time I see an extension cord plugged in with, someone leaving, it's a fucking fire hazard. She prepares to meet Glenn outside and notices that Glenn's father is staring at her out of her window. Fucking creepy.
Yeah, what a weirdo.
His father tells his wife that Nancy is a lunatic and he doesn't want her hanging out with her son anymore. Real sensitive to someone whose best friend was murdered less than a week ago that she saw, you dumb comb-over wearing fuck.
Not only that, like, it's two people that she's known that's been murdered in the past week. Like, come on, man, cut her a break.
I mean, it's a shame this dad didn't get murdered because he was just a fucking piece of work.
Ain't that the truth?
Nancy tends to her wound and puts on her members-only jacket and prepares to slip out. But she sees her mom pounding down some booze right outside her room. She tries to call Glenn, but he doesn't answer. His mother does. His father then grabs the phone and tells her she will have to talk to him tomorrow.
Two things here. Why the fuck is her arm still bleeding? That's a lot of blood coming out of that wound that's, has some gauze on it. The gauze must be so saturated with it that it's oozing out of the bottom of it. Did nobody think to get her some stitches?
Well, that's what I was going to say. She probably needed stitches.
And how easy was it back in the day if you just didn't want to talk to a motherfucker?
Yeah, I have written here. That's the original blocking someone.
Right? Just phone off the hook. I'm done for the day.
Fuck you. Nancy tries to call again, but gets a busy signal. She then gets a phone call and hears Freddy's claws screeching. She pulls the phone out of the wall and it starts ringing when she goes to leave her room. It's Freddy and he tells her, "I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy." And his mouth appears on the bottom of the receiver and tries to stick his tongue in her mouth. So it appears she is awake when this is happening, but whatever.
I know. I was confused there too. So does he have access to the real world? I'm guessing she's awake here because she goes out the door and then she's still awake, right?
I assume so. I don't, unless it was one of those little micro nap things where she just like fell asleep for like 30 seconds. I have no idea.
A micro necroleptic episode.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to explain. She smashes it and realizes Glenn is in danger, and as she tries to leave, her mother says she locked the house down so she can't leave. Locked. We cut to Glenn sleeping with the big-ass TV sitting right on his crotch. The score kicks up, and we see Glenn pulled down into the bed, and blood comes shooting out like a fucking geyser. They use the rotating room in this scene as well. Now, originally, Glenn was supposed to, like, kind of get spat back out of the bed. He was just supposed to, like, come standing up out of the bed and just fall over. But with all that blood, I don't know what the fuck would be left.
This part of the movie really fucked me up as a kid.
Oh, I can imagine.
Like, I remember just seeing this. I think the first time I ever saw this movie, I was about maybe 5 or 6, and then, turning it on and seeing that. Okay, I've had enough TV today.
Oh, I can imagine that was quite the scarring experience.
And right after that is one of those classic lines. Like, there's always horror. There's always one line in horror movies that always sticks out to you that you just remember. I love it because when they're pulling the stretcher in after this, he says, "You don't need a stretcher, you need a mop."
I was going to mention that
I
too.
fucking love it. Oh God, I love it.
Yeah, and they're catching the blood with buckets and shit. Like it's a real shit show. Lieutenant Thompson shows up and waves to Nancy, who was watching out the window. She calls Glenn's house to talk to her father. She tells him that she's going to go get the guy and tells him to come over in 20 minutes. He then tells the deputy to watch his house to look for anything funny. She then booby traps the shit out of her house, and she gets a lot done in 10 minutes.
Dude, Nancy goes full Kevin McAllister on Freddy setting up these traps. Actually, this movie came first, so Kevin McAllister went full Nancy Thompson.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. That's a fair statement. Nancy then tucks her mom in and goes to bed herself to finally have a showdown with Freddy. So actually, I guess she did all the shit in like 5 minutes because she had to go talk to Mommy for a minute before she went to bed. They should have said like a half an hour. You know, they should have gave it a little more time. But
right.
It's just a small
Just
thing.
another thing, this the Nightmare on Elm Street movie moves in time that is not like our own.
Oh, that's for fucking sure. Nancy goes to bed herself to finally have a showdown with Freddy. She says a prayer and goes to
Did
sleep.
you notice how her watch talked?
Yeah, that's weird.
I thought that was very interesting for the 80s. What the hell does it say? Countdown mode, 10 minutes and counting. That's really high tech for the 80s.
Yeah, I think the last watch I had that talked was like a Sea Watch or something.
I don't think I've ever owned a watch that talked. Unless you're talking about like a smartwatch.
I did, but it was like a video game type of watch. I mean, it was late 90s, early 2000s.
Oh, one of those Tiger electronic bullshits.
Something like that,
okay.
Yeah.
That I can see then.
She walks down the stairs of her house and heads to the basement and finds Freddy's glove is gone. Then she walks down more stairs to the boiler room, hearing Tina's voice as she does so. She yells out to Freddy as she walks through the boiler room. She finds Glenn's bloody headphones by the fire.
Two things here. Whenever she goes for the glove, did you see the rug on the background hanging on the wall?
It was like it looked like a Last Supper type of
it was
thing.
Dogs playing pool, but it was hanging up like a painting would, but it was a rug and it was sagging and it just looked so out of place. And I'm thinking, who the fuck put that there when there's no other decor around other than pipes?
Oh, I have to go back and watch that. That's
it's really weird. And I'm glad you mentioned that Glenn put his names on his headphones. Who the fuck puts their names on everything? Like Freddy puts his name in his hat. Glenn puts his name on his headphones. Like they must have a lot of theft here on Elm Street.
I guess so. Yeah, that is Fred Krueger, Mom. It's in his hat. Yeah, and the headphones. It's just fucking stupid. She finds Glenn's bloody headphones and he pops out and scares her. And she jumps and it shows her landing in the roses outside of her house. She tries to jump. She jumps out of frame in her house, but lands outside. Which is dreams. That's
and
fine.
It's absolutely crazy because when she jumps from the boiler room, she does a header into the bush, and it doesn't even look like a bush. It just looks like debris. So what it looks like to me is she's doing a head plant directly onto the lawn.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd think she'd be a little more fucked up, especially if what happens to you in dream happens in real life. She jumps on Freddy and grabs him just as her timer is ticking down. She wakes up in her room with Freddy nowhere in sight. Just as she accepts she seems to be crazy, he jumps up from beside her bed and scares the shit out of her. She runs out of her room and locks the door, and it sets up a booby trap with a sledgehammer. She yells out the window for the deputy to get her father, and she runs down the stairs. Freddy finally gets the door open, and the sledge whacks him right in the chest, and he falls over the banister and lands on the stairs.
Even falling over and, getting back up again, Freddy takes a sledgehammer to the chest like a G.
Damn right he does. That would kill a normal person.
Seriously, like what gives this man his superpowers out of the dream world?
Yeah, because he's supposed to be normal outside of, in the real world, but As we will come to see in future installments, that's not really the case. Lands on the stairs. Freddy then runs into a tripwire, and a light bulb Nancy filled with gunpowder explodes. She breaks a window and yells for the deputy to get her father, and he finally decides it's a good idea and does so.
This fucking deputy in this movie pisses me off. She's breaking every single window in her house screaming for help, and he's like, it's gonna be okay. Oh my God, this guy.
Yeah, he's a fucking idiot. He, that would be his last day on the force if I was Lieutenant Thompson.
Right?
That's for fucking sure. Freddy follows her to the basement, and she throws some gas on him and sparks a match and decides she wants some extra crispy Freddy and lights him on fire. She then opens the door and sends him back down to the basement. Just as he had made it to the top, he, goes tumbling down the stairs.
I love it. Like, this is what I mean, this one step ahead shit. Like, she has all the traps open and even had the insight to know that Freddy, when he gets to the top of the stairs, to bash him with the door to send him back down. One step ahead. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, she's very resourceful, which is something that wasn't typically seen of these heroines. We'll get to it at the end, but yeah, she is very resourceful. Lieutenant Thompson and his deputies break the door down, and we see fire footprints everywhere. Freddy is on top of Marge upstairs, and the lieutenant puts the fire out with a blanket, and we see Marge's charred corpse sink into the bed. Lieutenant Thompson leaves to attend to his deputies after he doesn't really acknowledge what he saw.
I was going to mention that. He has the most poker face on for what just happened. What just happened? I don't even know what just happened.
Yeah, he doesn't sell it at all.
He just looks onward like I don't know, like a fucking rabbit got run over in the middle of the road.
Yeah, he's like, oh, well, that was interesting.
That was unfortunate. Oh, God.
He leaves, and Freddy emerges from the bed as Nancy goes to leave. She tells Freddy that she isn't scared of him anymore, and she demands her mother and friends back before saying, "You're nothing, you're shit." And he disappears in a blue effect. Nancy opens the bedroom door and is walking out of her house in the bright daylight. Marge follows her out and promises Nancy she's going to stop drinking. Glenn, Rod, and Tina pull up with Glenn driving, which is curious that he picked up Nancy last, considering they live right across the street from each other.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
It's another one of those things that I never really thought about it either until I was watching it. I'm like, well, that's kind of fucking... I understand why they did it, to have this whole last scene with the mother and her waving to the kid, all the kids and stuff, but...
No continuity.
Yeah. The red and green roof of the convertible comes up, and the car goes down the road as Nancy begs her mother for help. But Marge just smiles and waves. We then see Marge being sucked through the window of the door. It was actually a blow-up doll. And we pan to the girls singing 1, 2 song.
What?
And playing Jump Rope.
I didn't know it was a blow-up doll, but I can kind of see it now that I just watched the movie, how fast it gets sucked in through the window. But
I'm pretty sure it was that or a mannequin. I'm pretty sure it was a blow-up
like
doll.
The last 5 minutes of this movie, what the fuck is going on? Did she now realize that she was still dreaming when she walked out of her bedroom at night and it was the front door during the day and the bars were gone and everybody was alive?
Well, this is where Bob Shea and Wes had their disagreement. Wes wanted it all to be a dream, and Nancy and her friends drive off. But Bob Shea wanted a hook for a sequel, and they had the ending we saw. And they did Wes's ending in an ending with Freddy driving the car, but decided on what we saw. I think since they couldn't figure out the ending, it kind of just became a mishmash of shit.
It became, I can see it now, it became a mixed match of both, but it doesn't fucking make sense.
No, it really doesn't fit. Basically, Wes Craven never wanted this to be a franchise. He wanted just this one movie. It was all a dream. Goodbye. But they saw dollar signs, and it's kind of just, they were right to make sequels, obviously.
Fair enough. And I mean, even still, even if they would have done Wes Craven's ending, they still could have, I mean, look how many movies people made from a horror franchise. Look at Friday. Look at Jason. They always find a way to bring him back.
Yeah, even after they had finality, of it all being over. Now, the positives is a good premise, good story, good effects for a low-budget movie. And this movie really gives you the 1980s feel. And the good heroine. Is she your best heroine in a slasher movie?
I would say she's up there. I absolutely love Jamie Lee Curtis. You can't beat Laurie Strode, but Nancy is a very... you know what? I don't know. After watching this movie, she really... It's impressive how she's just one step ahead. Like Laurie's the babysitter, can't get away, but she's resourceful too. She can get away. She's fast and does what she needs to do. But Nancy's like the only heroine in a horror movie that actually takes the killer head on from the beginning.
Yeah, that's what I like about Nancy. Laurie ran in Halloween. She ran in Halloween. She ran in Halloween 2. She ran for most of H2O before she finally, was like, oh, fuck this guy.
Right. She had a breaking point, but Nancy was the only one that takes him head on from the start.
Yes. And that's why I would say I think I got to give it to her as the best one. Laurie Strode's the classic, and Laurie Strode, for any Halloween fan or horror fan in general, you can't beat her, but I think Nancy might just edge her out a little bit.
You got a point about that.
The acting isn't the best all the way through this, but it's a young cast, and especially, Heather Langenkamp. It's her first starring role, and a couple of the scenes were weak sauce, but it was good. And some of the effects do look a little cheesy, but hey, it was a low-budget horror flick.
And I mean, for what they paid for it, a lot of the special effects were really great. Freddy, the wall, like slicing into his chest. I mean, a lot of it looked really good.
Oh, yeah. There were only a couple bad. Like the sucking the mother through the door at the end, I thought was kind of but...
It doesn't look as fluent as it should. I agree.
But other than that, it was all pretty decent. But overall, this is not only a staple of the 80s, but of the horror genre in general. And many consider it to be Wes Craven's masterpiece, which I would agree with as far as writing and directing.
I would agree.
The themes of teen angst and a skeptical older generation is pretty strong, and also of powerlessness. This is one of the greatest slashers of all time, and it deserves to not only be called a great horror movie, but just a great movie, period.
I would agree with that. It doesn't even particularly pertain to the horror franchise, even though it is a horror movie. It's just an overall fantastic idea.
Oh, for sure. And horror movies... We've seen in recent years that they've kind of lost a lot of the stigma around them, but this is just a great movie, and it deserves to be remembered as such. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Late and Cassette Podcast. Do you have anything else to add?
No. Thanks for having me. It was great rewatching one of the classics again. Definitely my favorite of the entire Freddy franchise.
And you'll be back for Freddy vs. Jason,
yes,
correct?
My second favorite movie of the Freddy franchise. If you consider it a Freddy movie, I think we went over that last time a little bit.
Yeah, we do. I don't know if it's my second favorite, but I have more affection for Freddy than you do.
That is true. Freddy's not my top go-to slasher. His movies are a lot of miss for me. Don't get me wrong. Some of them are really good, and when they're good, they're great. But he becomes too comical for me.
I can see that. Next week, I will be reviewing the sequel, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. We'll see what that has to offer. Don't forget to give a follow on Twitter or like on Facebook, and I'll be back next week with Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge.